If you've been paying attention to the Democrats, you may be wondering what exactly is their strategy to combat Trump's agenda. Then you look at Representative Maxine Waters heckling federal workers outside of the Department of Education building to the outrage over USAID. There's no clear and cohesive opposition to MAGA. Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford wrote about this in his latest Beltway brief, and he joins us now. So Bedford, let's have you try to explain the Democratic strategy or lack thereof right now.
So it's definitely a lack thereof. There is no strategy. There's infighting. There's a lot of argument among senior figures and past figures on what the future could potentially hold. I mean, you've got Maxine Waters out there screaming in front of the Department of Education, 86 years old, wagging her finger in people's faces. And this is the sort of thing that may have seemed more normal, I guess, or been more accepted in the first Trump administration when his presidency was regarded as a fluke. And the Democrats essentially treated him as an illegitimate leader, someone who was just an aberration. And don't worry, Joe Biden or someone else is going to come and we're going to put these things right. But his credibility has built an incredible amount globally. He's one of the more credible political figures on the planet right now, and is someone who is kind of defining the political moment and the times. So this street theater just doesn't work anymore. But then you look at what they're doing in D.C. and in the actual Senate. You've got these octogenarians and septuagenarians staying up all night to protest OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, the confirmation of Russ Vought, who served as the director of OMB during the first administration for 4 years. Now, granted, this is a really important role. It's one that we've talked about a lot. It's crucial to rooting out the deep state. I get why they're freaked out about it. But at the end of the day, the American people don't know what OMB is, and they're not going to make Russ Vought a thing. He's not going to be some kind of villain character that you can really work with. It reminds me of the frustration Republicans have trying to make George Soros a thing. It's just not ever going to happen. Stick to things that are people who are well known, like Nancy Pelosi. And then you've got this really kind of wild fight over USAID. Now, I get it. This is a part of their worldview. It's been a crucial part of the machine. We've been talking about that in the mandate. It's wild to see it being dismantled in real time. But the American people don't favor foreign aid. The American people voted for this. And there's very few voices who are out there actually saying that. You've got Bill Maher out there saying, actually, this is exactly what people voted for. And the president's approval rating is zooming. I mean, actually, with Zoomers, it's up 10 points. That's incredible. It turns out that they're a more conservative generation than the baby boomers in recent polling. So when but everyone unites and says, we got to cut money. One of the places is foreign aid. So when you have Democrats banging themselves against the wall and telling Rahm Emanuel, who was chief of staff to Barack Obama, a two-term successful Democratic president, when you've got David Axelrod, who was advisor to Barack Obama for 2 terms, a very successful president, and you have these clowns who just can't really get it together, and they're dismissing this advice, it shows you just how lost they are.
It really is an amazing time to be alive. We have to say, I mean, when you look out there, at least when I look around and try to steelman these arguments and say, well, what do they have? What you see is there's 2 big blocks. One is the low information, mentally ill sort of Redditor, who's out there very perturbed about what's going on because they're just so much in the bubble of weird lefty media. And then there's the professional managerial class, which, is losing their McMansion or whatever, and literally no one gives a shit. Like, there's no one who cares. And there's nothing that they can do to really rally the troops. And like exactly as you say in this column, you got octogenarians out there trying to rally the protest. It's insane. It's a beautiful, beautiful time to be alive. We can't talk about it enough, but we do have some obstacles that we do need to talk about. Our own Rebecca Zelko today writes this article about the House Freedom Caucus, and they're putting out their own bill, basically suggesting we need 2 beautiful bills and not 1 big beautiful bill to get moving on the president's agenda. This is my understanding of it anyway, that as she writes, they see, look, we have priorities with the border, et cetera. We need to get this smaller bill out there now to get the ball rolling, rather than what Mike Johnson seems to want, which is the 1 big beautiful bill. Is that correct? And why? My instinct on this, without knowing all the details, has been, why not just pass a smaller bill now? Why are we waiting for this one big package? What can you tell us about this?
Well, there's been such confusion on Capitol Hill these past few weeks. No one seems to know who's in charge. There's been an unbelievable level of finger pointing. People looking at Mike Johnson supposedly in charge, but his team is certainly in over their heads. And people are looking at him and saying, "All right, where's the budget?" And then they're looking at Ways and Means and saying, "Congressman, where's the budget?" And then they're looking all over, and everyone seems to think it's someone else's job. So despite having a 3-day retreat in Miami to work this out, despite having such a long meeting at the White House last week that Benjamin Netanyahu, who was supposed to meet with the president afterwards, left his meeting with the most powerful person on the planet, they still hadn't been able to hammer it out. So this is kind of an opening fire. And what's interesting about what you hear repeatedly from the Freedom Caucus, but you don't hear from leadership, is why are people so afraid of the legislative process? Their worry here is that you sit there for weeks and weeks and weeks, nothing happens, you're supposedly making plans behind closed doors, and what usually happens with the Republican and the Democrat, the modern DC form of governance, is they all just come out with this last-minute omnibus. It's absolutely giant, or some reconciliation thing that's absolutely giant, and they say we have to pass this or everything shuts down. And there was no legislative process. The congressmen and senators, more so congressmen, have been reduced to yes and no votes at the very end, in line with party allegiance, as opposed to saying yes along the way, having discussion on the floor, having debate back and forth. Now, leadership's point on this is that they don't want to expose infighting. A two-person Republican majority is so unbelievably small that Chip Roy, whoever else wants to, can pull the plug and blow the whole thing up. So for the last couple of weeks, you've seen the Freedom Caucus going to leadership saying, well, how much do we need to cut? And leadership says, well, what do you need to get? What do we need to cut in this budget for you to be a yes vote? Freedom Caucus turns back and says, well, that depends on how much you're spending, right? I mean, we can't balance a budget unless I know what's going out as well as what's coming in. All these things have to be broken down. This is just an opening fire, and what I suspect is going to be negotiations. I mean, these last couple of weeks have surprised me, but I still don't think Washington is ready to just pass unadulterated the Freedom Caucus's opening shot in D.C. for what they would like to see the budget. But this will hopefully force Republicans in Capitol Hill to just get moving.
Yeah, and there's a certain number of Republicans that are always just a no vote on the CR, no matter what's happening.
And they can't do that anymore.
I know. That's why this time around is actually going to be more interesting than what we saw in December. And if you're like me and you love a deadline, March 14th, kids, is the date that we should have circled on our calendar. Because my question to you is, do you think that anything will get done before that March 14th deadline where they have to pass, by that point, another CR bill?
I think it's not looking good right now, honestly. It should be imminently doable if Republicans get their act together and start actually putting forward proposals. Because now, here's the good thing about the Freedom Caucus putting this out. It's going to create jealousy. All those people who are saying, it's not my job, is now going to say, why are they doing that? That's my job. And they're going to come forward and put forward their proposals. And these things, it's been so hard to build anything because you haven't even known what the materials were. They couldn't list their spending cuts because they didn't know how much was going to get spent, and vice versa. They didn't know what they're going to do with taxes. They didn't know what they're going to do first. It's kind of like when you've got a project at home, and it's just so big, it's overwhelming. You don't know what to do. You end up drinking beers down in the basement instead. You have to get started. You have to put that cornerstone down. And this is a step in that right direction. I mean, DC is like an Adderall-hyped college kid. They like to get it all done the night before. They like to pull an all-nighter. They like to absolutely cram, and maybe they definitely don't do their best work. They're certainly not learning any lessons. But unfortunately, that's the way the city operates.
Well, let's talk about Hunter Biden. I want to let the past die, but we need to change topics and talk about Hunter, everyone's favorite prodigal son. As you know, Chris, Lindy Lee, a former Democratic strategist and fundraiser, revealed that Hunter Biden, quote, commandeered the country after Joe Biden's debate performance last year. Of course, Lee's credibility here is questionable. She's accused Donald Trump of terrorizing the Capitol and colluding with Russia. And this is an article that many people are saying, many people clicked on Joe's article, and they were curious about this. What do you think about listening to what she has to say?
I tell you what, it was a little overwhelming to see the zombie pass blast into my signal messages at 6:30 this morning after Super Bowl Sunday to wake up to as many work slacks and as many signals as I did about the crackhead president with a baby crying. It was a great morning. But the whole thing came together, and I started looking at it first. At first, I kind of wrote it off a little bit like you did. Like, oh, she's a fundraiser. I mean, what do they know? Although, of course, they are privy to gossip, and she was a very high-level bundler of money for the Democratic Party. But then I started to remember, and my wife covered Hunter Biden for a very long time for the Washington Examiner, that aides were always annoyed at the access that he had. Aides were always chafing, and you'd occasionally see the leaks that Joe Biden takes his advice way too carefully, way too seriously. And then I looked back and saw the June article from NBC right after the debate. And it was kind of funny. The way that NBC poised it is Hunter Biden keeps his father close after disastrous debate performance. Like, look at this loyal son in his father's eyes. They didn't actually decide to craft this as crackhead is the new president running the country. But they did include things like he was sitting in on meetings. He was now a part of this decision process. The kind of thing that you would normally do if your father was running a business and he was on his last few months and he was suffering dementia. But this was different because Hunter Biden is a felon, a crackhead, and an international schemer of all kinds. So not the kind of person you'd want to give a clearance to, but now he's in these meetings making these decisions. And I realized that it's just another one of those wild stories. It actually does vibe. It fits with contemporaneous reporting. And remember, if you're in a courtroom and you can say all you want, well, this guy did this 6 months ago. But if you have a contemporaneous account 6 months ago, you wrote an email to someone saying this guy's doing something, it carries a lot more weight than just remembering back and saying this is the way it was. So that kind of combination of factors doesn't make me think that Hunter Biden was running the country, but he definitely had way more impact than what the American people expected. And it's extremely rich. All these Democrats to be complaining that there's an unelected Elon Musk involved in government. But none of these federal workers are elected. Hunter Biden was not elected. Barack Obama had left office, and the staff who ran Hunter Biden, none of them had election certificates. So it's just rich to hear this line coming from them with all these stories breaking.
Listen, we were promised shock and awe from the Trump White House. We have gotten that, right? All of these Trump executive orders have come out. But the one thing, Bedford, he can't go back and just tell us everything that happened in the Biden White House. So how long are we going to have to wait for like a tell-all book, right? I want to know all of the crazy stories and the real ones that happened in the Biden White House. So how long am I going to have to wait for that?
Oh, I bet you they're working on it right now. Actually, that's a good idea.
Please.
I should reach out to my old publisher and figure that out, because you know that once one person launches a salvo that blasts Jill Biden or whatever, she's going to release a book that blasts back. And that's once you get all the fighting and the infighting back and you start to see the back and forth and you see people making money, and that's when you can read them all, parse through the details, and actually figure out where the truth might be somewhere in the middle of all the cat fighting.
Look, I just want to know whose cocaine it was. Was it Kamala's or Hunter's? I mean, I'm open-minded. I just want to know whose coke it was. Very simple.
Poor Hunter Biden. Imagine losing a pack of narcotics at the workplace where it's the White House. You're searching your pocket, like, where to go? Did I finish it? And then the Secret Service calls? Oh, man. You're too old to be getting in that kind of trouble, Hunter.
All right, Bedford, I just want that for Christmas, that book. Wherever you need to talk to, whoever you need to talk to there in D.C., make that happen. Christmas Day, Christmas morning, this is what I want to be unwrapping. Yeah, well, perfect. That's even better. I can use this over a Christmas break then. Thanks so much.
I'll get back to you.
All right, we'll talk to you later, Bedford.
See you tomorrow.
When you look at it, all this stuff that's going on with the craziness in D.C., right? We talk about the Democrats at the very beginning of that segment, how they have no idea what they're doing. But then you look at the Republicans and you're like, well, I hope that they know what they're doing at this point, but now you have the House Freedom Caucus taking the lead after Lindsey Graham in the Senate had already said, you know what, I'm going to lead on reconciliation. And at this point in time, it's like Republicans get together, form a plan, and move forward with whatever the plan is, because it's never been easier to look better than the Democrats than right now. And yet they're kind of stumbling over a stack of papers that's less than an inch high.
Let me give you a very simple rule from Professor Peterson about politicians, elected politicians, especially legislators. The vast majority of them need to be told what to do. Someone has to tell them what to do. You may not want to believe that. You may rebel against me and say you want statesmen. But let me just tell you, from the time that I've been walking the earth, most legislators need to be told, most politicians need to be told what to do. And in this case, they're begging for a leader. So God bless the House Freedom Caucus for coming up. But they have to be corralled and told what to do by someone that makes it happen. So if they step up, House Freedom Caucus, to do 2 bills instead of 1, great. But they won't do it themselves as congressional critters the way that they are, at least in our day and age. And that's just the bottom line. And so do they have a plan? No. Someone is going to have to tell them what to do and give them a plan. And if that's the House Freedom Caucus, great. I don't care who it is. But you need to internalize the principle. You have to tell these people what to do.
I'm going to give myself some homework tonight, and I'm going to figure out who they are, the Republicans that never vote for a CR, and just figure this out, because it's going to be very fun, I think, this time to play along at home and just try and see how this is all going to shape up here in the next coming weeks and into the next month here for the Republicans on their side.